American Jewish history began, it's believed, as early as the 1500s. Conversos, or secret Jews who hoped to elude the Spanish Inquisition, made their way to St. Augustine with explorer Ponce de Leon. 1762, a defeated Spain gives possession of the territory known as Florida to the British in the Treaty of Paris. And finally, Jews have the right to live here as Jews. 1763, 3 Sephardic Jews start businesses in Pensacola, then the capital of West Florida. In 1822, a Jewish girl is born there. The same year, 1822, Moses Levy, a Sephardic Jew from the West Indies, founded America's first Jewish communal settlement in Micanopy, just south of Gainesville. 1836, Abraham C. Myers, a Jewish West Point graduate, serves as Army quartermaster during the Seminole Indian Wars. The city of Fort Myers bears his name. 1841, Moses Levy's son, David Levy Yulee, helps to write Florida's Constitution. 4 years later, he becomes Florida's first United States Senator. In 1853, he builds Florida's first cross-state railroad. 1895, Jews in Tampa and Key West raise funds for Cuban revolutionaries fighting for independence from Spain. 1933, David Schultz from Daytona is elected Florida's first and only Jewish governor. 1974, third-generation Floridian Jew Richard Stone goes to the U.S. Senate 129 years after the first Jewish senator from Florida. The story of the Jews in Florida is like a mosaic. Each piece is important, tells its part of the story, and fits into its own place. Every Jew from Pensacola to Key West, from Jacksonville to Sarasota, from Orlando to Miami, is a part of this mosaic. Whether your family has been here for generations or your family's Florida story begins with you, the pieces are all needed to make the story come together. The history of the Jews in Florida includes every community, every nook and cranny of the state, and Jewish immigrants from around the globe. It's a story rich in historical importance. It involves people like Philip Delinsky of Jacksonville, head of this state's longest continuing Jewish family, who came by 1850, and his son George, the first known Jewish boy born in Florida in 1857. Philip's sister Helena and her daughter Nina, the first Miss Florida in 1885. Jews like Michael Levy from Pensacola, who served in the Civil War, and Jews who helped establish new communities, like Isidore Cohen, the first permanent Jewish settler in 1896 in a frontier town called Miami. And the first Jewish family on Miami Beach, Joe and Jenny Weiss, who came in 1913 and started a Florida tradition, the world-famous Joe's Stone Crab Restaurant. There's the Wishnowsky family, Jewish immigrants from Poland who started in the citrus business in Lakeland in 1933, and Admiral Ellis Zacharias of Jacksonville, Chief of Naval Intelligence in the 1940s, who was awarded a Silver Star for his role in the surrender of the Japanese in World War II. From Max Orovitz, who founded Mount Sinai Hospital on Miami Beach, as Jewish doctors coming home from World War II couldn't get hospital privileges because of discrimination, to the thousands of Holocaust survivors who found a new home here. Florida's Jews helped in the formation of the State of Israel. And Florida opened its shores to Cuban Jews in the 1960s, whose European families had settled in Cuba because U.S. immigration quotas of World War I had closed. And Orlando's Marshall Nierenberg, a University of Florida graduate who won the 1968 Nobel Prize in Medicine for breaking the genetic code. There were businessmen and merchants from Fort Walton to Fort Lauderdale. There were also farmers in Palm Beach and Orlando, and cattle ranchers in St. Augustine and Arcadia, tobacco and cotton growers in Quincy and Tallahassee. There have been more than 150 Jewish mayors in Florida since 1869. There have been state legislators and Supreme Court justices. And there was the ingenuity of a people determined to succeed. People like Hyman Lieberman, whose inability to speak English led him to the only job he could get, watching Panama hats dry, and later led him to a thriving millinery business in Orlando. There were Jewish developers of hotels, theaters, roadways, bridges, and cities. It gave us pride to know that there were artists, teachers, actors, athletes, professionals, and politicians. In every facet of our history, Florida Jews were there. All the while, each generation, each tile in the mosaic contributed to our heritage, added to our treasures in their own special ways. There were 6 synagogues in the state before the turn of the 20th century. The first was built in Pensacola in 1876. The oldest one, still standing, is in Ocala, built in 1888. From chuppah to Kiddush cup, from an Austrian etrog box of silver that survived the Holocaust and made its way to Orlando, to the cherished and preserved symbols of our culture, passed from generation to generation. Until Mosaic, no comprehensive study had ever been done about Jews in Florida. It began with interviews, then research, materials, artifacts, and documents flowed in from hundreds of families. And it all started to come together. It turned into a traveling exhibit that made its way around Florida and around the nation. The interest and excitement caught on, and everywhere people wanted to know what would become of the large collection that had been gathered from families throughout the state. The movement to find a place for a permanent museum went into full swing, and the site was found. The book of Exodus in the Bible states, "And they shall build for me a sanctuary, that I may dwell in their midst." A synagogue or temple is any building or room that is set aside for prayer. The first temple, built in Jerusalem, stood for 400 years and was destroyed in 586 BCE. The second temple, built also in Jerusalem, was destroyed about 70 CE. Today, one wall remains, believed to be the Western Wall, and is called the Kotel. This destruction led to the diaspora, or dispersion of the Jews, to countries around the world, and led to the creation of local synagogues as centers of Jewish life and the spiritual home of a people in exile. Culture, geography, and religious perspective play a part in synagogue design. When Jews began to settle on Miami Beach in 1913, they could not live north of 5th Street due to restrictive covenants in land deeds. This 1936 building, built at 3rd Street, served the first Jewish congregation on Miami Beach. It was designed by Henry Hohauser, a noted Art Deco architect who was a member of the Orthodox congregation and boasts many features of the period. Hohauser was responsible for the design of more than 100 streamlined, modern-styled hotels, apartments, and other structures on Miami Beach in the 1930s and 40s. The building, listed on the National Register of Historic Places, served as the religious and cultural center for the South Beach Jewish community for many decades through the heyday of Jewish life here. The Torah, the Hebrew word for teaching, is a parchment scroll containing the 5 books of Moses and is read from a platform called a bima that faces east, the direction of Jerusalem and the First Temple. This marble bima was designed by Rabbi Moses Mechaloff, who served Beth Jacob congregation from 1937 through 1955. The 3 steps leading up to the bima symbolize the threefold blessing of the priest. These 5 steps leading up to the ark represent the 5 books of the Jewish Bible. The Orthodox branch of Judaism attempts to preserve all traditional religious beliefs and practices. The men and women sit in separate areas. In this building, the women sat upstairs in the balcony. As the Jewish population of this neighborhood declined in the 1980s, this building was abandoned. It deteriorated from the elements and was threatened with demolition. Water entered through holes in the roof as a result of Hurricane Andrew in 1992. Enter Mosaic, a perfect marriage, a vacant synagogue with an important cultural history, and an organization with a mission to collect and preserve nearly 250 years of Jewish history in Florida. The two-year restoration process that began in 1993 dealt with transforming the building from a synagogue that sat more than 800 people to a state-of-the-art museum, preserving the integrity of the building, repairing the structural deterioration, and matching the external appearance of the original building as shown on this 1940 postcard. Special care needed to be taken with the stained glass windows that were designed by Rabbi Moses Meshloff. The colorful panels were fabricated in Miami and installed in 1940. The lower windows have flower motifs, stars of David, and pomegranates. Each of the upper windows depicts a Jewish symbol or Hebrew month. You probably noted the use of the Mogen David or six-pointed star on the doors as you entered, and throughout the exterior and interior of the building. Mogen David means Shield of David and has come to be the accepted symbol of Judaism. On the main floor, in addition to the structural work, the Art Deco chandeliers were removed, sent out for refurbishment, and rehung, the largest one suspended 40 feet from the top of the dome. A new Appalachian oak sloping floor that replicates the original termite-eaten one was installed. To transform the women's prayer section that was the balcony into the museum's administrative offices, the area was partitioned with glass walls. What a view to look out over the main floor and witness the transformation that took 2 years. Miles of new wiring for the high-tech electrical, fire sprinkler, phone, computer, and security systems were installed that enable this 1936 architectural treasure to function as a museum for the 21st century. By 2005, the museum needed more space for Jewish art and history exhibitions, and the collections had grown beyond the capacity to house them in the 1936 building. The museum purchased the original synagogue next door that opened in 1929, the 1936 building that had been leased, and the parking lot to the north of the two buildings. Until 1929, Jews had been denied permission to construct a synagogue. They had to ferry across Biscayne Bay to attend religious services in Miami. Finally, Jews were accepted as a permanent part of the resident population of the city. Miami Beach's first synagogue, the original home of Congregation Beth Jacob, was designed by architect H. Fraser Rose and built for $25,000. Being Orthodox, the women sat separately, upstairs, with only 2 sets of windows through which to peek down to the main sanctuary. In 1946, a 2-story addition was erected on the east side of the building, with the religious school classrooms upstairs. Downstairs became the social hall. In 1986, Beth Jacob congregation began to dwindle. They moved back to their original building, and then in 2005, the congregation left completely. The new owners, the Jewish Museum of Florida, ensure that the building so rich in Jewish history will continue to be preserved and become a repository for the chronology of Florida Jews. In 2007, the 1929 structure underwent a 1-year restoration and is called the Jonathan Simons Building to honor the major donor. In one day, This new exhibit space also hosts school groups working on art projects and then an organizational luncheon event or public program in the evening. Additional museum staff offices are located upstairs in the former women's balcony on the west side. The area on the east side of the second floor, which was formerly the synagogue's classrooms, has become the Collections and Research Center. You are invited to donate materials from any period of Jewish life in Florida to be preserved in our archives and then passed down to future generations. In 2008, the museum built a skylighted connection for the two historic buildings. This new space is Bessie's Bistro, named for the donor Bess Meyerson, who was the first and still only Jewish Miss America in 1945. This transformation enlarged the museum from 7,200 square feet to nearly 15,000 square feet. We have spent $4 million restoring the two former synagogues to become the museum. In the lobby, you'll see the names of those who helped support this historical challenge with contributions in honor or memory of family members. There are many ways to demonstrate support for the museum's mission. First, we invite you to become a member of the museum. Then, you can help support the annual operating budget, special events, and changing exhibitions. Just ask any staff or volunteer how to be involved, as we're eager to welcome you into our museum family. For Jews, the museum instills a sense of pride by telling stories of how Jews maintain their heritage and help contribute to the state's growth and record of achievements. This creates Jewish memory, strengthens Jewish identity, and helps ensure Jewish continuity. For non-Jews, the museum traces one ethnic group's immigrant experience as an example of the acculturation process of all families. This education helps diminish bigotry and prejudice and enhances understanding and tolerance of living in a diverse ethnic community. We make a positive difference in people's lives by presenting diversity as enrichment and by inspiring people to think. The mission of the Jewish Museum of Florida is to collect, preserve, interpret, and communicate the Jewish experience in Florida since at least 1763, perhaps even from the 1500s. How does the museum achieve this mission? Through its collections that grow daily, continuing research, its core exhibit, Mosaic, Jewish life in Florida, changing exhibitions, cultural and educational public programs, publications, student and outreach programs, and many special events, including for Purim and Hanukkah. And in a very short time after opening in 1995, the museum was awarded accreditation by the American Association of Museums, an honor bestowed on less than 5% of this nation's museums. This means the museum functions at the highest level of professional standards, and our members and visitors benefit from this excellence in public service. The Jewish Museum of Florida is a leader in the field. In 2003, we initiated Florida Jewish History Month, so each January we can focus on educating students and adults about the contributions of Jews to every area of development of the Sunshine State. We create and distribute lesson plans and exhibits about Florida Jewish history and sponsor public programs on varying themes each year. This success led to our contacting federal legislators to get Jewish American Heritage Month, which in 2006 became a national observance each May. In 2010, a Jewish astronaut took our original proclamation on a 5-million-mile space mission and then returned it to us. You can become part of all this. We are proud to be the first cultural institution in South Beach and part of the revitalization and renaissance. These unique buildings are dedicated to the Jewish pioneers throughout Florida who created a history that we now honor, and to those who have settled in recent years and are continuing to contribute to our state's Jewish heritage.